Buddy Guy invented playing guitar with his teeth. Then he watched Jimi Hendrix do it, and everything he thought he knew about showmanship changed forever. Chicago, summer of 1967. The South Side blues clubs were still the beating heart of American guitar music. This was before blues became a museum piece, before it got polished and packaged for white audiences. This was raw, sweaty, dangerous blues played in small rooms where the stage was just a raised platform and the audience stood close enough to feel the heat coming off the amplifiers. Buddy Guy was 31 years old and already a legend in Chicago blues circles. He'd played with Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, and Willie Dixon. He was known for two things: his blistering guitar technique and his wild stage presence. Buddy didn't just play guitar. He performed it. He'd play while walking through the crowd on a 150-foot chord. He'd play behind his head. He'd play with his teeth. That last one was his signature move, his invention. Buddy Guy was the first guitarist anyone had seen playing notes with his teeth instead of his fingers. It wasn't a gimmick. He could actually play melodies that way, bending strings, hitting clean notes, making the guitar sing while it was in his mouth. Other guitarists had tried to copy it, but nobody did it like Buddy. It was his thing. The club that night was Teresa's Lounge on South Indiana Avenue, a small venue that could maybe hold 200 people if you packed them in tight. Teresa's was famous in the blues world. Every major blues artist had played there. The stage was barely big enough for a four-piece band. The ceiling was low. The room smelled like cigarettes, whiskey, and decades of music soaked into the walls. Buddy's set had just ended. He'd played for 2 hours, the crowd sweating and shouting, and he'd pulled out all his tricks. He'd walked into the crowd, played behind his back, and yes, he'd played with his teeth during a slow blues that had people shaking their heads in disbelief. Backstage, which was really just a small room with a couch and some equipment cases, Buddy was holding court. 3 or 4 younger blues guitarists had gathered around him, asking questions, wanting to know how he did what he did. One of them, a kid maybe 20 years old with a cheap Gibson, asked the question they all wanted to ask. "How do you play with your teeth like that? I tried it and just hurt my mouth." Buddy laughed, took a drink from his beer, and leaned back. "That's because it's my technique. I invented it. You can't just copy it. You have to understand it." He picked up his Stratocaster, a sunburst model that had been with him for years. "See, most people think it's about biting down hard. That's wrong. You use your teeth like a slide. Gentle pressure. You're not gripping. You're touching." He demonstrated, putting the guitar to his mouth, his teeth on the strings, playing a few clean notes. The young guitarists watched like students watching a master. "I got the idea from watching harmonica players," and Buddy continued. "They use their mouth to shape sound. I thought, why can't the guitar work the same way? So I started experimenting. Took me months to get it right. Months of looking stupid, hurting my teeth, getting no sound. But I figured it out. And now it's my thing, my signature." There was pride in his voice, not arrogance, but the legitimate pride of someone who'd created something new, who'd pushed the instrument into territory nobody else had explored. That's when someone in the doorway said, "He's right. Buddy invented it." Everyone turned. Standing in the doorway was a young black man with a huge afro, wearing a colorful shirt that looked like it belonged in a completely different decade. He was holding a white Stratocaster. Buddy recognized him immediately. Jimi Hendrix, the kid who'd left America for England and come back famous, the one everyone in the music world was talking about. Are You Experienced had been released 2 months earlier. The album was everywhere. Purple Haze was on every radio station, but Buddy hadn't seen him play live yet, had only heard the records, which were impressive but also strange. All those effects, all that feedback. It was blues but filtered through something psychedelic, something new. Buddy respected it but also didn't quite understand it. This wasn't the blues he knew. "Jimi Hendrix," Buddy said, standing up, extending his hand. "What brings you to the South Side?" Jimmy shook his hand. His grip was gentle. "Came to hear real blues. Came to hear you. That set was incredible." "You were out there?" Buddy asked, genuinely surprised. He hadn't noticed Jimmy in the crowd. "Back corner. Didn't want to make a scene. Just wanted to listen." Buddy nodded, processing this. The famous Jimi Hendrix had come to his club to watch him play. That felt good. That felt like respect. These guys were asking about the teeth thing, Buddy said, gesturing to the young guitarist. I was just explaining how I invented it. Jimmy smiled slightly. You did invent it. I learned it from watching you. Buddy felt that surge of pride again. Even Jimi Hendrix, even this new guitar god, had learned from him. You do it too? Sometime, Jimmy said quietly. Show me. The room went quiet. The young guitarists looked at each other. This was about to be something. Jimmy walked further into the small backstage room. He didn't ask for permission, didn't make a show of it. He just picked up his white Stratocaster, checked the tuning with a few quiet notes, and plugged into a small practice amp sitting in the corner. Buddy leaned against the wall, arms crossed, watching. The young guitarist stood frozen, understanding they were about to witness something they'd talk about for the rest of their lives. Jimmy started playing a slow blues. Standard progression, nothing fancy. His fingers moved across the fretboard with that fluid precision Buddy had heard on the records. Clean tone, no effects yet, just guitar and amplifier. Then, without warning, without any preamble or announcement, Jimmy lifted the guitar to his mouth. His teeth touched the strings exactly where Buddy's had been minutes earlier, and he played. The first notes were clean, perfect pitch. Buddy nodded. Okay, the kid knew the technique. Buddy had expected that, but then Jimmy did something Buddy had never thought to do. While playing notes with his teeth, Jimmy's right hand moved to a wah-wah pedal on the floor. His foot started working it. Suddenly, the notes coming from his mouth weren't just clean blues notes. They were crying, wailing, speaking. The wah-wah effect made the guitar sound almost vocal, like it was forming words. Buddy straightened up from the wall. Jimmy continued. He started bending behind the nut of the guitar, changing pitch while his teeth held the strings in place. He was playing melody with his mouth while simultaneously using his hands to manipulate tone, sustain, and expression. It wasn't just a trick anymore. It was musical. Then Jimmy did something that made Buddy's jaw drop. He arched backward, the guitar still in his mouth, still playing, and he kept the notes going. He wasn't just playing with his teeth. He was performing with his teeth, making it part of a larger theatrical moment while never losing the musicality, never letting it become just showmanship. When he came back up, he transitioned seamlessly into playing with his hands again, the guitar leaving his mouth without a break in the musical phrase. No pause, no reset. It was one continuous statement. The whole thing lasted maybe 90 seconds. When Jimmy stopped, he lowered the guitar and looked at Buddy with an expression that was completely free of ego. Like that? Buddy didn't respond immediately. He couldn't. He was processing what he'd just seen. The young guitarist in the room stood silent, looking between Buddy and Jimmy, unsure what to say, unsure what they'd just witnessed. Finally, Buddy spoke. His voice was quieter than it had been before. How long have you been doing that? Couple years, Jimmy said. Saw you play at a club in New York in '64. You did the teeth thing during Highway 61. I went home and practiced it for 6 months. Buddy nodded slowly. I did invent it. You did, Jimmy confirmed. But what you just did, Buddy trailed off. I added to it, Jimmy said simply. You showed me the technique. I tried to make it say something different. There was no arrogance in Jimmy's voice, no challenge. He was stating fact. Buddy had invented the technique. Jimmy had taken it somewhere else. Buddy sat back down on the couch. He took a long drink from his beer. The young guitarist watched him, trying to read his expression. I thought I'd mastered it, Buddy said finally. I thought I'd figured out everything you could do with that technique. Play melody, bend strings, make it musical instead of just a trick. He looked up at Jimmy. You just showed me I was thinking too small. Jimmy sat down next to him. You weren't thinking small. You invented something. That's the hardest part. I just built on what you created. But you built better, Buddy said. Not bitter, just honest. Jimmy shook his head. Different, not better. What I do works for my music. What you do works for yours. You play pure blues. You don't need wah-wah pedals and effects. Your technique is perfect for what you're saying. Buddy looked at him. You really believe that? I do. You're Buddy Guy. You don't need to play like me. I'm trying to play like you, just with my own voice added. They sat in silence for a moment. The young guitarist didn't move, didn't speak. Understanding something important was happening. One of them, the kid with the cheap Gibson, finally broke the silence. "Mr. Guy, you look different than you did before." Buddy glanced at him. "Different how?" "Before, you looked like you knew everything. Now you look like you just learned something." The room went quiet again. The kid's face flushed, realizing he might have said something wrong. But Buddy smiled. A real smile, not forced. "You're right. I did just learn something. I learned that inventing something doesn't mean you own all its possibilities. It means you started a conversation." He looked at Jimmy, and this man just showed me how deep that conversation can go. Finally, one of the other young guitarists found his voice. "Can you show us how you both do it?" Buddy and Jimmy looked at each other. Buddy smiled. "Yeah, let's show them." For the next hour in that small backstage room at Teresa's lounge, Buddy Guy and Jimi Hendrix gave an impromptu lesson on playing guitar with your teeth. Buddy showed the foundational technique, the gentle pressure, the use of teeth as a slide, the importance of not gripping too hard. Jimmy showed how to add effects, how to incorporate it into a larger performance vocabulary, how to make it musical rather than just impressive. They traded the guitar back and forth. Sometimes Buddy would play and Jimmy would point out what he was doing right. Sometimes Jimmy would demonstrate and Buddy would add his own interpretation. It became collaborative. Two masters, different generations, different styles, teaching each other. The young guitarists watched, asked questions, tried it themselves. Most of them couldn't get clean notes. A few got close. All of them understood they were learning from history happening in real time. At one point, Buddy asked Jimmy, "Why do you do it? The teeth thing, the playing behind your back, the whole show. You're good enough that you don't need it." Jimmy thought about this for a moment. Because guitar can be more than just sound. It can be visual, it can be spiritual, it can be a full experience. The techniques you invented, playing with teeth, playing behind your head, they're not tricks if they serve the music. They're extensions of expression. Buddy nodded. "That's what I always believed. But people think it's just flash." "Some people will always think that," Jimmy said. "But the people who matter, the people who really listen, they'll understand." The session ended when the club owner knocked on the door and told them Teresa's was closing for the night. Everyone had left. It was after 2 a.m. Buddy and Jimmy packed up their guitars. The young guitarist thanked them both and left, their minds full of new ideas, new possibilities. At the door, Buddy stopped Jimmy. "Thank you for coming tonight, and thank you for showing me what that technique could be." Jimmy shook his head. "Thank you for inventing it. Without you, I'd never have thought it was possible." They shook hands. Buddy watched Jimmy walk out into the Chicago night, guitar case in hand, disappearing into a car that would take him to whatever famous place he was playing next. Buddy stood there for a moment, processing the night. He'd started the evening feeling proud of his innovation, his signature technique. He'd ended it understanding that creation is just the beginning. What matters is what others build with what you've started. Years later, after Jimmy died in 1970, Buddy would tell this story in interviews. He'd tell it with a mixture of pride and sadness. Pride that Jimmy had learned from him. Sadness that Jimmy was gone before they could collaborate more. In a 1989 interview, Buddy said, "I invented playing guitar with my teeth. That's true, I was the first. But Jimi Hendrix made it art. I made it a technique. He made it a language. That's the difference between a good player and a genius." The interviewer asked, "Did it bother you that he became more famous doing something you invented?" Buddy laughed. "No, it made me proud. That's what music is supposed to be. Someone creates something. Someone else takes it further. Then someone else takes it even further. That's how we grow. That's how the music stays alive." "Do you still do it?" "Yeah, I still play with my teeth. But after that night in Chicago, I do it differently. Jimmy showed me it could be more than just a crowd pleaser. It could be a real musical statement, so I incorporated some of what he showed me. Not copying him, just learning from him." "What do you think Jimmy would say about that?" Buddy smiled. "I think he'd say, 'Good, you took what I showed you and made it your own. That's what I did with what you showed me.' That's how it works." The story of that night at Teresa's lounge became legendary among Chicago blues musicians. People who weren't there claim they were. The details got exaggerated, changed, mythologized, but the core remained true. Buddy Guy invented a technique. Jimi Hendrix transformed it, and both of them grew from the exchange. Today, when young guitarists play with their teeth, most don't know they're doing something Buddy Guy invented in small Chicago blues clubs in the early 1960s. They think of it as a Jimi Hendrix thing, and that would bother some musicians, but not Buddy. Jimmy made it famous, Buddy said in a late career interview. I made it possible. I'm fine with that. That's my contribution. I opened a door. He walked through it and found a whole new room I didn't know existed. Buddy Guy is still alive, still playing, still occasionally playing guitar with his teeth. He's in his 80s now, a blues legend, a rock and roll Hall of Famer, recognized as one of the most influential guitarists in history. When young players meet him and ask about his signature techniques, he still tells them about that night in Chicago in 1967, about watching Jimi Hendrix take something he'd invented and show him possibilities he'd never imagined. That's what real musicians do, Buddy says. We don't compete. We build on each other. I gave Jimmy a technique. He gave me a new way of thinking about it. We both won. The night Buddy Guy watched Jimi Hendrix play guitar with his teeth wasn't about who was better. It was about innovation, respect, and the way art grows when artists learn from each other instead of protecting their territory. Buddy invented it. Jimmy transformed it. And the guitar, the blues, rock and roll itself became richer because both of them understood that creation is a conversation, not a competition.